For Bradley. J. Waugh writes, "Finally an I'm oppressed hole for me? Thanks, but no thanks. I'd prefer not to be told that holding the biggest burden I can muster is oppressive to myself. Peterson's teachings have restored my faith in humanity, whereas you and Mike are just pushing back on the direction of hopelessness. I don't think you're completely wrong, just that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater on this one. Question, is this in defense of men going their own way? Holding the biggest burden. With respect, Jay, you're not holding the biggest burden. It takes more courage for a man to face shame than fear. Recognizing vulnerability is a source of shame for men. Therefore, bearing witness to your vulnerability is the biggest burden a man can carry." Now, to answer your question, is this in defense of men going their own way? I don't think they need to be defended. I'm talking more about recognizing women as moral agents responsible for the state of decay in the world. My point in saying what I'm saying is simple. Throughout history, women's primary social role, not their physical role, not their reproductive role, is to connect the individual man's actions to the greater work of a society. Once again, I'll use Rome because it's the best example. Roman men provided for and protected Roma, the female personification of Rome itself. That was the context for their individual actions, how they tied their cooperative competition to the great work of Roman society. Is there a Roma right now? We used to have a Lady Liberty, the personification of due process, freedom of speech, civil rights. Where is she now? Look with clear eyes. Right now, the primary narrative connecting men's actions to a great work is patriarchy theory. Most women believe in it, even if they don't call themselves feminists. Men's actions create patriarchy, except where they're strictly controlled by women who agree that we live in a patriarchy. This is a control narrative. It's why feminists are quick to tie any oppression to women and patriarchy theory so that they can extend their control and strengthen it. It's not a white triarchy or a capitalarchy. It's a white patriarchy or a capitalist patriarchy, but always primarily a patriarchy. And think about it. If you can say that all men's actions and women's actions are patriarchy, are oppression of women, unless your brand of moral outrage gives its seal of approval, then you have set yourself up as the arbiter of the rightness and wrongness of all human endeavor. This ability women have to take the actions of individual men and connect them to a great work is a power and a choice that women exercise. Roma was created by Roman women, choosing to embody the virtue of forgiveness for tribal transgressions, to set aside individual injury and retribution to promote group unity. Women aren't base clay. They are individuals making moral choices different than those of men, in aggregate at least, but moral choices with profound consequences. And right now, the choices women are making are to teach patriarchy and oppression of women narratives. And they are enabling one small group of politicos to set up a nice fat theocracy for themselves. Moral tyranny is one result. The other is insanity. Because some people react to this narrative that everyone's actions are creating a society that harms women and children, minorities, women and minorities, with a compulsion to tear all social institutions to pieces. And all of this because women are choosing to use their power to tie individual men's actions to the greater work of society to some very bad ends. The only way we stop this is for men to pick up the burden of vulnerability despite the pain of shame and tell women, this is what you are doing to us and society with your choices. Until men stop running away from that burden, we don't know if women are doing this because they're monsters, or devouring mothers if you prefer, or if they're doing it because no one is telling them that something's gone wrong. The only thing preventing men from picking up the burden is fear of shame. If you need to hear me call it cowardice, so be it. It's cowardice, Jay. But until men pick that burden up, we're not walking out of this alive. Vulnerability is victimhood. Denying these things form the basis of the male identity. Accepting the burden of vulnerability is to be cast out from social approval. The story of Penelope is that she waited for her husband Odysseus for 20 years. despite everyone in her kingdom thinking him dead. Suitors came to vie for her hand, but she defied them all in secret by tearing apart her bridal veil's weaving each night. As I said, Odysseus has come home, but Penelope is caught in that cycle of defiance, unable to recognize him and turning herself into a monster through bitterness and anger. Penelope must see herself, but her mirror is the greatest weight in the world. Even Atlas couldn't pick that weight up. So let's not look at Atlas for the answer. Let's look at another masculine archetype. What would Jesus do? I say that with no irony. If bearing a burden for women is your calling, Jay, if sacrificing for women as Christ sacrificed the church is how you see yourself, Jesus' burden wasn't a cross made out of wood. It was society's judgment and condemnation. It was the shame of being cast out. If you think of him as a mythic figure or a god or even just a man, can you imagine in those dark moments of doubt that we all have, he felt shame at the thought of being so naked, his suffering laid bare and open for the entire world's eyes. The greatest burden of all is the shame and helplessness of having your vulnerabilities laid bare. Penelope isn't going to survive the coming chaos any better than you will, Jay. I know her mirror is heavy, heavier than any burden you have ever borne or imagined you could bear. You try to fit a finger under it and it doesn't budge, as if it was nailed to the ground by God's own carpentry. And you're telling me you can't move it. But you can, because there is a secret here. Penelope's mirror is you, and that's why you can't lift it. But you can use all your strength and turn your face to hers. At the end of the day, Penelope can't fix the mess she's made until Odysseus becomes her mirror. What did Jesus do but face the shame of vulnerability, according to myth, to bear witness to injustice he was helpless to prevent? So what would Jesus do? He would lay his suffering bare for all to be seen and cleansed by. Peterson tells you to pick up the greatest weight you can bear, Jay. Is there any greater weight than the weight of vulnerability? Is there any greater burden than the one Jesus bore with humility and courage? Speaking of enduring with humility and courage, Bradley has sent me another letter. He writes, Dreams, we all have them. From the moment you used the word patron the first time, I dreamed of being a donor. This is simply going to take a little more time than I initially anticipated, but the process began with a dream, and then putting one foot in front of the other. When there are no signs along the way, our faith is there to guide us and our decisions. Enclosed is a donation to help with Brian's medical bills. Please tell him the small army of Christians praying for him is increasing in numbers. I want to show you something, Bradley. This is my cash box. I hope you don't mind, but I've kept the donations you've been sending instead of depositing them. Month by month, you've increased what you've been able to send us. A year ago, you started with ones. Now you're at fives, and now tens, and now 20s. Your dream of becoming a patron will come true. In facing these issues, you bear the greatest burden there is. And not just that, despite your personal trials, you are still reaching out to try to make my burden lighter. I think you're as wise as the Magi, Bradley. You've thrown your lot in with a group of people, men and women, supporting each other. We might be a shot in the dark, but at least we're going the right way. And who knows, what we've got could be catching. Men and women recognizing each other's burdens and responsibilities. Women helping men, helping women, helping men. What a world that could be. I'm not telling men to be victims. I'm offering them the opportunity of fighting for someone who will fight for them. Hold fast, Bradley. Keep fighting for a better world with us. I'll hold a spot open for you in our Discord for that day your dream comes true. Thank you.